Part 1. The Allergy and the Alliance. Chapter 1. The Curse of the Crown. Opening on a panoramic view of Seoul, high above the city. Seoul, a city built on two things, ambition and pressure. For a man born at the summit, like Park Jae Hoon, the pressure is simply the air he breathes. At 28, Jae Hoon was the undisputed king of this concrete empire, the wealthiest CEO in the entire nation, running Park Group like a perfect symphony. Physically, he was commanding. Jae Hoon was tall, easily 6 feet 1, with the broad shoulders and defined physique of a man who treated his body with the same ruthless discipline as his portfolio. His hands, usually encased in custom, ultra-fine leather gloves, were large and powerful. His face was a study in Korean perfection, strong jawline, high cheekbones, and dark, penetrating eyes that were perpetually cold. He possessed a powerful, imposing presence, manly, poised, and utterly rigid. Beneath the bespoke tailoring and the icy calm, Jae Hoon was one of the most profoundly isolated men in the world. He was living a secret born of trauma, a systemic, life-threatening allergy to contact with a woman's skin. A casual touch was, for him, a roll of a fatal dice. Days, sometimes weeks, of agonizing recovery. The thought of physical intimacy was not a yearning, but a terrifying threat. Only his steadfast assistant, Mr. An, and his powerful, traditional grandmother, Madame Park, knew the cruel truth. Every day, Jae Hoon moved through his kingdom in a state of suspended panic, a king trapped in a sterile, invisible cage. Chapter 2. The Cost of Contact. The truth of his condition was absolute, and its lesson had been relearned just 2 days prior. The contact with a female executive, Ms. Kang, during a high-pressure Sky Tower conference had lasted barely a second before his glove was properly secured. It was enough. Jae Hoon didn't walk out of the room, he fled. Inside the pressurized, lead-lined walls of his private medical suite, the crisis had escalated with terrifying speed. He tore off his suit jacket, stumbling to the sterile stainless steel counter. The point of contact was no longer a rash, it was an angry, weeping landscape of blisters spreading across his wrist and migrating up his forearm. His lungs seized first, his breathing turning into a shallow, rasping cough. The world tunneled, the hyper-modern suite spinning into a blur of silver and white. He was drowning in his own body. He slammed the emergency button built into the wall, not a panic button, but a self-administered death sentence warning. Seconds later, Dr. Han burst through the door. Vitals crashing, anaphylaxis. The doctor, accustomed to the routine, didn't hesitate. The custom-compounded antidote, a chilling, potent cocktail of antihistamines and epinephrine, was plunged deep into his muscle. The injection brought not relief, but a chemical shock, a wave of nauseating cold that fought the biological fire. "That was too close, Jae Hoon," Dr. Han said, stripping off his latex gloves. "Your reaction time is decreasing. The next one—" Jae Hoon lay prone on the examination table, the systemic shock leaving him weak and shivering. "The next one will be fatal," he finished, his voice raw. He looked at the perfect, unblemished skin of his face in the reflection of the ceiling, a mirror image of the ruin creeping beneath his shirt. "I need to secure the merger. That's the only priority." "The priority is finding a solution, not a distraction," Dr. Han insisted. "We need total isolation." Jae Hoon closed his eyes. Isolation was a slow death. The alternative was a quick one. Chapter 3. The American Prodigy, Kira. Half a world away, Kira Hayes stood in the middle of a massive digital schematic of the Seoul financial district, reviewing the final merger pitch. Kira was striking, biracial, effortlessly elegant. Her heritage, part Korean through her paternal grandmother and part American, gave her an outsider's clarity and an insider's respect for tradition. At 24, she was the head of the Hayes Asia Expansion Initiative. She had achieved more by this age than most executives twice her age. Her approach to business was kinetic. "We are not acquiring to hold, we are merging to explode," she often told her team. In the final hours before her flight, she held a long, warm conversation with her father, James Hayes. "The Park Group is a giant, Kara, a very slow, entrenched giant," James warned. "Jae Hoon Park is a known entity, brilliant but famously cold. He runs the company like a fortress." "A fortress that needs a catalyst, Dad. Their risk assessment is non-existent. They're afraid to move," Kira countered, her voice buzzing with excitement. "I read his file. He's never been publicly linked to anyone. He lives in a sterile bubble. He's controlled. I respect that control, but I'm going to Seoul not to merge, but to ignite." "And what if he doesn't respond to ignition, sweetie? What if he's simply too rigid?" Kira smiled, an expression of pure confidence. "Then I will find the key to that cage. I will make him see that the greatest stability comes from the greatest expansion. I will make him want to partner with us, not just accept us." She arrived in Seoul carrying the buoyant confidence of a woman who had never failed, unaware that she was about to meet a man who saw her and every woman as a biological danger. Chapter 4. The Predator's Strategy. In a private, heavily paneled club overlooking the Han River, the conspirators were finalizing their strategy. Jin-soo Park, Jae Hoon's uncle, his wife Hwa Young, and his son Hyun Park were at the table. Hoon was 3 years younger than Jae Hoon, and equally handsome, but in a completely different register. Where Jae Hoon was all strong lines and imposing manliness, Hoon had a softer, more boyish charm, dark, wavy hair, and a perpetually mischievous smile that Jae Hoon lacked. "Jae Hoon is paralyzed by indecision regarding his marriage mandate," Jin-soo stated, watching the streetlights glitter far below. "The clock is ticking. The shareholders are concerned. We strike now using the American as our weapon." Hwa Young took a slow sip of wine. "The American, Kira Hayes. I researched her. She is not easily swayed by money or title. She is formidable." Hoon smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "That makes her perfect. She is the only woman Jae Hoon is spending sustained, close time with. The chemistry, intellectual, intense, is visible even in video conferences. If he continues to deny the mandate, we force the romantic issue." "How precisely do we force it?" Jin-soo asked. "I will play the foil. I will be the available, charming, safe alternative. I will flirt with her openly. I will make it look like a genuine rivalry for her affections. This puts Jae Hoon in an impossible bind. If he ignores me, he appears weak and cedes the American. If he fights for her, he must make a public claim, which, as we all know, is biologically impossible for him." Hwa Young nodded slowly. "The best strategy is to make his shield into his cage. If he can't marry her, he loses the alliance. If he breaks the alliance, he loses the board." Hoon looked out at the city lights, his thoughts drifting to Kira's sharp wit, the thought of winning her no longer just a corporate tactic. He smiled, and then his smile faltered. Deep down, a small part of him actually wanted to win her. Chapter 5. The Family Mandate and the Lie. The next day, the pressure intensified in the Park compound. Madam Park sat, unforgiving, across from Jae Hoon and a silently sweating Mr. An. The setting was opulent, but the atmosphere was thick with cold expectation. "The Hayes Venture merger is a spectacle, Jae Hoon, not a solution," she stated for the third time that week. "Your silence on this matter of marriage is a weakness. Your cousin exploits it daily, hinting at fundamental suitability issues." "Grandmother, the merger secures our East Asia expansion for the next 30 years. That is stability," Jae Hoon insisted, his voice clipped. "Stability is blood, Jae Hoon. Stability is an heir." "Mr. An, your updates on these social introductions are lackluster," Madam Park challenged, redirecting her cold scrutiny to the assistant. Mr. An stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Madam,
Mr. Park is following every protocol. However, these attempts are complicated by the sheer volume of his corporate obligations. Furthermore, as you know, Mr. Park values discretion. Many candidates are too aggressively public. Aggressively public, Madam Park repeated, raising a skeptical eyebrow. Be specific, Mr. An. Has there been any genuine personal engagement? Mr. An swallowed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The last genuine engagement involved a spontaneous touch during a charity photo op that required 36 hours of continuous medical attention. Regrettably, madam, no, Mr. Park is intensely private. We seek a woman whose poise matches his own. One must understand, in this current climate, any touch, any casual contact must be managed to protect Mr. Park's image as a serious, professional leader free from scandal. The lie, delivered with practiced
ease, was designed to emphasize Jae Hoon's cold control rather than his medical fragility. Madame Park was dissatisfied, but the lie held. Then find a suitable woman with impeccable restraint, Jae Hoon. The moment you solidify the Hayes deal, you will use that leverage to announce your alliance. You must marry within 6 months. Chapter 6. The First Disguised Contact. The first meeting between Jae Hoon and Kira was the disaster Jae Hoon dreaded. Kira, naturally warm and American, reached out her hand in an open, friendly greeting. Time seemed to slow. Jae Hoon froze, seeing not a friendly gesture, but a lethal weapon. The loyal Mr. An executed the code-red diplomatic diversion, loudly dropping a stack of folders, forcing Jae Hoon to step back and avoid the lethal handshake. Mr. An then profusely apologized, insisting on maintaining formal Korean custom, citing an urgent revision. Kira withdrew her hand, confused. Mr. Park, I apologize. I meant no disrespect. We do things differently in New York. Jae Hoon found his voice, the mask of ice sliding back into place. Disrespect noted, Miss Hayes. I prefer to deal with substance, not pleasantries. Let us proceed with the substance. Kira, stung, decided to meet ice with ice. She saw his distant gaze and his refusal to engage on a human level, and she decided to match his corporate stiffness, determined not to let him see the disappointment that had settled in her chest. Over the next 2 weeks, the merger negotiations forced them into a rigorous, cold dance. They spent hours together, their strategies flawless, their intellectual chemistry undeniable. Chapter 7. The Interruption. 3 days before the family dinner, Jae Hoon and Kira were locked in a late-night strategy session in the Park Group war room. The room was cold, minimalist, and silent save for the tapping of pens. They were hunched over a single projection, minds perfectly aligned, their arguments evolving into a single cohesive strategy. If we pivot on the Shenzhen assets, we can absorb the tax hit and still net an 8% gain, Kira murmured, pointing to the screen. We pivot, but we announce the loss publicly. That sets a precedent for aggressive corrective action. Jae Hoon completed, his eyes meeting hers across the table. For a split second, the intensity was not corporate, it was intimate. That moment was precisely when the door swept open and Hyun Park strode in, looking effortlessly casual in a bespoke cashmere sweater and designer jeans, carrying a bottle of rare champagne. Well, well, look at the two geniuses, Hyun drawled, his boyish charm filling the sterile room. Working so late, a merger or something more personal? Jae Hoon immediately straightened, his hands slipping into his pockets. Hyun, this is a private corporate strategy session. You are not authorized. Relax, brother. I was just in the building, Hyun said, passing Jae Hoon and stopping directly in front of Kira. Miss Hayes, you look exhausted. You've clearly been subjected to Jae Hoon's punishing schedule. That's his great weakness, no sense of pleasure. He set the champagne bottle on the table, close to Kira. I brought this for you, a small token. We won't open it here, of course, but it's a necessary antidote to all this cold logic. Kira smiled, intrigued by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Mr. Eon, that's very kind, but I'm still running on pure logic. I see the logic, Hyun countered, leaning a little closer, his voice dropping to a low conspiratorial murmur. But I also see the spark. And I know from experience that a woman with your intelligence needs more than just a fortress. She needs an adventure. Jae Hoon moved sharply, cutting the distance between Hyun and Kira. Hyun, you are interfering with a multi-billion-dollar agreement. Leave. Interfering, or diversifying the relationship, Hyun retorted, not backing down, his eyes challenging his brother. He looked back at Kira. Think about it, Miss Hayes. Risk versus predictability. Which do you think builds a greater empire? Before Kira could answer, the door swung open again. Mr. An entered, looking distraught. Mr. Park, an urgent call from the Tokyo branch. Complete systems failure, sir. You must take it now. The emergency was entirely fictional, but the panic in Mr. An's eyes was real. It was his desperate measure to break the proximity between Kira and Hyun. Jae Hoon shot Mr. An a venomous look, knowing the drill. Excuse me, Miss Hayes. Business calls. He walked out, Mr. An practically sprinting to put distance between the two of them. Hyun watched them go, his smile widening. He had achieved his goal. Jae Hoon was rattled, forced to retreat, and Kira was left alone, clearly enjoying the chaotic interruption. He turned back to Kira, his gaze shifting from playful to genuinely appreciative. Your comment earlier about the elaborate cage, you understand him, don't you? He's terrified to live. Kira looked back, her expression thoughtful. He's terrified to lose. Hyun nodded, genuinely impressed. She sees too much. This is going to be more difficult and much more rewarding. Chapter 8. The Extended Family Dinner. The family dinner, hosted by Madame Park, was not a social event. It was an inquisition. The entire Park clan was present, including Jin-soo and Hwa-won, all dressed in conservative, intimidating luxury. Jae Hoon sat at the head of the table, rigid and silent, his leather gloves perfectly fitted. Kira sat across from him, impeccable in a conservative, dark silk suit, prepared for battle. The interrogation began immediately after the introduction of the main course. Madame Park, Miss Hayes, you speak of igniting the Asian market, but fire, in the wrong hands, leads to ash. Can you assure us that your American methods will not jeopardize the slow, accumulated strength of the Park legacy? Kira, Madame Park, I believe that strength is only accumulated to be deployed. The market respects action. Hayes Ventures provides capital and strategy for action. We do not diminish the legacy, we solidify it for the next century. Jin-soo, uncle. A century is a long time. It requires continuity. Mr. Park, as you know, has been singularly focused on business. Ms. Hayes, what are your thoughts on balancing the demands of a global corporation with the demands of a powerful family? Kira, a global corporation is a family. It requires patience, investment, and a firm, unwavering loyalty to the future. I grew up in a powerful family. I understand the expectations. I believe Mr. Jae Hoon handles both with the utmost seriousness. Seriousness is good. Passion is better. We're concerned, frankly, that Mr. Park views this alliance as strictly transactional. Kira, are you comfortable with a relationship that lacks fire? Hyun cut in before Kira could answer, leaning forward and addressing his aunt with faux sincerity. Mother, you wound the girl. Of course she desires fire. And that, I believe, is the problem. Jae Hoon's relationship with passion has always been purely theoretical. He has the mind of a fortress, and he expects everyone to live within the walls he builds. I, on the other hand, enjoy a good escape. Jae Hoon's response was immediate and lethal, no longer directed at Hyun's words, but at the genuine, dangerous pull he saw between Hyun's charm and Kira's curiosity. Jae Hoon, my stepbrother as always mistakes recklessness for passion, Miss Hayes. Passion is fleeting. Discipline is enduring. He finds pleasure in risking the structure. I find strength in building it. I assure you, Miss Hayes, that my focus on this alliance is absolute. I will not tolerate distractions. The unspoken message was clear. Stay away from Hyun. The dinner ended in a cold stalemate. As the family dispersed, Hyun lingered by Kira's side. He's jealous, you know. He hates that I can move freely without all that stiffness.
He paused, looking directly at her, the boyish charm hardening into something genuine. "He calls me reckless, but he just calls you Miss Hayes. I want to call you Kira. I want to know what you think when you're not defending his fortress." Kira met his intense gaze, recognizing the genuine pursuit. "You are very good at escaping, Mr. Hyun, but I'm better at building." Hyun laughed, a deep, satisfied sound. Building, escaping, conquering. It's all the same to her, and I want to be the one on the inside. The rivalry was no longer just about the company. Hyun now desired Kira for himself, recognizing her as the only worthy adversary and perhaps the only woman capable of understanding him. Chapter 9. The Final Days of Control. In the days leading up to the gala, the pressure became unbearable for Jae Hoon. He worked in complete isolation, his food delivered by automated drone, his meetings conducted via fiber optic communication. He wore his gloves even while sleeping. The thought of the gala, the massive crowd, the forced proximity, it was a nightmare. Jae Hoon's internal monologue. "I need her company. Hayes Ventures is the perfect impenetrable shield against Hyun. But I cannot have her. I cannot risk the touch. I am the richest man in Seoul, yet a single brush of skin will bring me to my knees." Mr. An was running Protocol Fortress, a complex security plan to isolate Jae Hoon at the gala. He hired dozens of extra security guards whose sole job was to subtly guide female guests away from the chairman's orbit. He personally inspected Jae Hoon's custom-tailored suit, ensuring the wool density was thick enough to act as a primary barrier against any accidental contact. Meanwhile, Hyun was relentlessly in the press, dropping calculated hints about the obvious romantic dynamic between the two CEOs. The headline screamed, "Park Air finally finds match in American Heiress?" The pressure had reached its breaking point. Jae Hoon knew Hyun would engineer a crisis at the gala. He just didn't know how. The perfect stillness. The annual philanthropic gala was a polished cage. Jae Hoon was magnificent but rigid, his chief assistant, Mr. An, hovering nearby, ready with the auto-injector. Kira, tired of the sterile dance, finally approached him, determined to test the limits of his coldness. She leaned in to whisper a comment about the joy of working with him. His breath hitched. It wasn't just the allergy. It was a devastating, raw, and desperate desire. Hyun watched them and engineered the moment with cruel precision. He approached the table and executed a loud, purposeful stumble, knocking a glass of champagne liquor toward Kira. Everything happened in slow motion. Jae Hoon threw his body in front of hers, positioning his coat to block the splash. The danger of the drink was averted, but the fatal danger had arrived. A fleeting, tiny contact. Skin met skin. His blood ran cold. Mr. An's face went white, the auto-injector flashing in his hand. Mr. An moved to pull them apart, prepared for the 2-second window before Jae Hoon's throat closed. But the fire never came. Instead, where Kira's palm rested on his arm, there was only a profound, unexplainable calm. Her skin was impossibly warm, soft against his own, and it was doing something utterly foreign to his biology. It was grounding him. It was a perfect silence in the middle of a screaming biological alarm. Mr. An froze mid-step, the antidote uselessly gripped in his hand, his eyes wide with professional panic that instantly morphed into utter disbelief. He was watching a biological impossibility unfold. A deep, bone-shaking shiver ran through Jae Hoon. This was pure physical realization. Every nerve ending that had only ever registered poison now registered one word: safe. He looked down at the point of contact, then back up into Kira's face, his heart hammering against his ribs in a rhythm that was equal parts terror and exhilaration. He felt the sudden crushing weight of 30 years of solitary confinement lift, replaced by the terrifying responsibility of this discovery. Survival meant nothing without this contact. Every single molecule in his body was suddenly screaming, not danger, but possession. He knew with the stark, frightening clarity of a man who had just found his cure and his cage, that he would never let her go.